All right, let's jump straight into it. Welcome to this explainer on the legendary rock band 38 Special and their honestly unbelievable 5-decade journey. I mean, we're talking about an absolute institution in American music here. But what's fascinating is that their story is so much more than just a playlist of massive FM radio hits. It's really a story about pure grit, constant adaptation, and this incredible brotherhood that somehow survived against all the odds. To really wrap our heads around their massive footprint right out of the gate, we just have to look at this number, 20 million. That's 20 million albums sold over a 50-year career. You know, in an industry where most bands are just a flash in the pan, they hit it big and disappear a couple of years later, moving 20 million units proves that 38 Special didn't just find an audience, they kept them through sheer undeniable stamina. Tracking their evolution from local hopefuls to arena rock titans is a pretty wild ride. We kicked things off way back in 1974 with their formation down in Florida. Then we hit 1981, which was this massive turning point with the platinum success of Wild-Eyed Southern Boys. Fast forward to 2013, a really bittersweet year when founding member Donnie Van Zant had to step down and retire. And that brings us all the way up to July 2025, marking the highly anticipated release of their brand new album, Milestone. Okay, let's look at their early days. First up, Southern Roots and Stolen Locks. Long before the sold-out stadiums, Donnie Van Zant and Don Barnes were literally sacrificing everything for these late-night rehearsal sessions in Jacksonville. In fact, co-founder Donnie almost didn't make the jump at all. He seriously considered just sticking with his high-paying railroad job. But his older brother, Leonard Skinner frontman Ronnie Van Zant, convinced him to give music one last shot. So they spent their nights rehearsing for 4 hours straight, right after finishing their grueling day jobs. They gave up holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, just to chase this crazy dream. Now, you might be wondering, how did they actually get the name 38 Special? You'd probably think a band with a name like that had some grand cinematic origin story, right? Well, the reality is a little bit more chaotic. Picture this. They're rehearsing in a warehouse. The locals call the cops over the noise, and the band gets trapped inside because someone slapped a padlock on the door. They couldn't get out. So one of the responding officers steps up and famously says, "That's all right, we'll let this 38 Special do the talking," and literally shoots the lock off the door to free them. And boom, a legendary band name is born. Now, actually, scratch that. I should mention that guitarist Jeff Carlisi has kind of hinted over the years that this might have just been a brilliant myth cooked up for early marketing, but honestly, either way, it is an absolutely fantastic piece of rock lore. Moving on to their genius pivot, the arena rock formula. This shift perfectly illustrates their evolution. Back in the 1970s, their sound was heavily rooted in raw, gritty Southern rock, mostly driven by Donnie's vocals. But as we transition into the 1980s, they made this brilliant pivot toward melody-driven arena rock and power pop. This is when Don Barnes really stepped up to take over the lead vocals. His voice was just so perfectly tailored for those soaring, radio-friendly anthems. A massive part of this new formula was teaming up with Jim Peterick in 1979, who, if you don't know, co-founded Survivor and wrote Eye of the Tiger. Talk about a game changer. Sitting around Peterick's kitchen table, he and the band co-wrote these completely defining, massive hits like Hold On Loosely and Caught Up in You. By combining those heavy Southern guitars with Peterick's undeniable pop hooks, they unleashed a string of 3 consecutive platinum albums starting in 1981. I mean, they were literally dominating FM radio. But, you know, getting to the top is one thing. Surviving the endless highway is something else entirely. Just look at this number, 100. That is how many cities 38 Special continues to play every single year. It absolutely proves their relentless road warrior ethic. They aren't out there just lazily playing the old hits. They bring a high-energy party to their fans night after night, never phoning it in. They've suffered, starved, and triumphed together on those endless highways. And of course, it took a toll. They maintained these punishing cross-country touring schedules for decades, surviving multiple lineup shifts along the way. In 2013, they took a really heavy blow when founding member Donnie Van Zant had to officially retire from music due to severe inner ear nerve damage. But Don Barnes stayed the course as the driving force, flanked by incredible veteran musicians like Bobby Capps, who's been holding down the keyboards and vocals since 1991. They basically became their own support system, surviving the constantly shifting tides of the music industry. Which brings us right up to their newest chapter, hitting a new milestone. So they gear up for their first studio album in 21 years, appropriately titled Milestone, And I just love this mindset from Don Barnes. He said, if you're gonna do it, you might as well go big. When you're reintroducing yourselves to the world for your 50th anniversary, good enough simply isn't gonna cut it. And to go big, they brought in the heavyweights. They reunited with Jim Peterick. Barnes would literally fly up to Chicago with these half-finished songs, just sketching out ideas with his lifelong friend. They also tapped Train frontman Pat Monahan for a track called Slightly Controversial, and even got rock legend Randy Bachman of the Guess Who on the socially conscious song Long Long Train. Plus, to make sure the whole thing hit with a modern heavy swagger, they brought in hard rock legend Johnny Kaye to mix it. Now this is the craziest part to me. How did they record it? On the fly, across 10 different phases, while simultaneously playing those 100 cities? This wasn't some relaxing month in a quiet studio where they're playing ping pong between takes. No way. They recorded this incredibly polished album in brief, chaotic little windows between sold-out tour dates. Barnes was literally singing final vocal harmonies in a recording booth while a car was idling outside to rush him to the airport for the next gig. And the music itself? It totally bridges that gap between their past and present. So Much So Right opens the record as this kinetic, riff-heavy mission statement. Barnes actually said it's meant to silence anyone who thinks they're too old to rock. Then you've got All I Haven't Said, which is an awesome throwback to 1960s jangle pop, co-written by Barnes and his wife, Christine. And then tracks like The Main Thing just let longtime drummer Gary Moffett and guitarist Jerry Riggs absolutely tear it up at highway speed. So that leaves us with one final thought. After half a century of endless highways and chart-topping anthems, how many bands can truly say they never slowed down? Honestly, very, very few. In an industry that constantly changes, that literally chews up and spits out artists every single day, 38 Special's endurance is a true masterclass in rock and roll survival. It's absolute proof that if you have the grit, the hooks, and the brotherhood, the ride truly never has to end. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack their incredible story on This Explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.